Question number 4, I'm going to add a little bit of an intro here. For our residents, in case you didn't know, 5 out of 6 of your tax dollars go to the county. There's a good portion of that, over half of that is for schools, which is separate from board supervisors. So the question is, and as residents know, the town of Vienna government has its own services in certain areas, such as police department, trash recycling, planning and zoning, and other services. So I'll start reading. Since we do not rely exclusively on county services, town of Vienna residents over-contribute to parts of the county budget through real estate taxes. We pay the same tax rate to Fairfax County as everyone else, in addition to a real estate tax to the town to cover services such as police, trash recycling, planning and zoning, and park services. Therefore, we do not rely exclusively on county services. Here's the question. Do you favor a more equitable tax scheme or revenue transfer? If not, why not? If so, what specific mechanisms would you consider? Starting with Mr. Messick.
So it's certainly an interesting question. We have a few towns similar to Vienna throughout the county, such as Herndon, and it's it's kind of a form of double taxation in the sense, because if you're paying the same tax rate to the county, but you're not receiving the same services because you're taking care of those services yourself through additional taxes, it brings up quite a conundrum. So to be honest, this is an issue I had not thought of before, this question, but it is an issue that I think it brings up a good point, and it is something that not only will I look into, but I think that and if we were to do this would just be for Vienna, this would be for Herndon and other towns that are in a similar situation. There may be a consideration that we should advocate for on the Board of Supervisors, being like, look, they're taking care of their police and all these other types of expenses that we would normally pay for. Maybe we should find a way to make sure their tax burden is reflective of that, as opposed to taking the same amount of taxes that we would out of every other resident throughout the county. Because that does create a disproportionate amount of tax revenue relation to services provided, or at the very least maybe increase the amount of tax revenue that's coming to Vienna in light of that if we don't change it. Since we wouldn't be providing police services directly, maybe we could use what would be the equivalent of that in other types of expenses, and that would be a very strong argument when other supervisors are like, hey, why are you trying to send so much money towards Vienna? It's like, well, they're paying more for less. Well, same for less.
Yeah, I think there are two issues here. One, you have to look at the numbers. As was mentioned, more than half of the county's tax revenue goes to schools, and the Vienna residents get the exact same services for schools as everybody else in Fairfax County. So there may be some inequities in terms of the sharing of services or providers of services by the town that are not provided by the county. But there are also some revenues that go from the town to the town directly and don't come to the county. For example, BPOL, the Business Professional Occupational License Tax revenue, for folks or for businesses in the town, go to the town. They don't go to Fairfax County. I think it is probably a worthwhile exercise to look at that and see if there might be some inequities that might need to be addressed. But there's a bigger issue that I see, and I've talked about it on my website too. I think we need to figure out ways to relieve the burden on the residential real estate tax. That's going to be a long-term problem. It's been a long-term problem. But I worry that going into the future, we're not going to see the same type of tax revenue generated from residential real estate tax, but also our commercial real estate tax, as people don't use offices as much anymore, as we don't go to shopping malls as much as we used to. These are really the two things that have allowed us to have an excellent school system. They've paid for many of our services that we've become used to, and a level of services. So I think over time we really have to step back and make sure that our local tax base is not only overburdening one particular tax type, which is the residential real estate tax, but also that it grows with the economy so that we're not shortchanging ourselves in terms of public services, but we're actually providing services as our economy grows.
It is an interesting problem. As a resident of Reston, I have to say there are times when I'm actually jealous of this problem because the town of Vienna has, as has been referred to, its closer governing body than Reston does. And so to have decisions about land use made by people you can talk to on the street, made by your neighbors, people who've lived in the community for a long time, is something that is of great value. And I know as a Reston resident or anyone who's in unincorporated parts of Fairfax County, they're represented by one district supervisor, and the rest of the votes are held by people who don't live near you at all. And so, while I think it is a problem that the tax burden may be disproportionate, it's a problem that comes with benefits. And so also funded in that tax, you all get, the town of Vienna does get its water and sewer, its trash, its snow removal paid for. And I pay assessments to Reston Association that cover a lot of things. So I would like to take a close look at the numbers. I have not done that. But I wonder how the comparison comes out. It is a choice between a small town with its own town council and mayor and an unincorporated area. So let's take a close look and see. But I think that at this point, I don't know many residents of the town of Vienna who regret living in Vienna. So I hope the burden has not been excessive to this point. Thank you.
I completely agree with you on that last statement. People who live in the town love the town and love the capacity of the town to be able to make decisions on its own behalf. And in terms of tax burdens, it's, and when we talk about equity in taxes, that becomes really an interesting issue, not just for the town of Vienna and Hunter Mill District, but then for Fairfax County and downstate areas within the county, how our tax dollars are going. And what does that really mean when we're talking about equity issues and services that are being provided? The county does provide the schools, and that is an important part and a very critical part to the community. And that is a significant portion of that $2.50 that goes to that to the schools. For the remainder, I agree with Walter that we really do need to look at restructuring taxes, because I think that there's going to be a really a strong shift over the next, if you look forward 30 to 50 years, on how our revenue sources are coming in. And if we don't take a look at that, both the town of Vienna and the county itself are going to suffer in terms of revenue and how we can provide our services. There are some things that we can look at a little bit more globally as we look at this. When I mentioned Fairfax County and downstate, we know that a lot of our Fairfax County tax dollars actually end up going downstate to help areas that absolutely need some of those tax dollars at this moment. But if there was a way to uplift other areas through development of jobs, green jobs, and so on, maybe the burden would shift and we would get some of those tax dollars back up here, and that would help us. And so when we're talking about equity, we need to look at locally for the town of Vienna versus Hunter Mill District, and then we need to look within the county and then also statewide in terms of how those tax equity issues.
Thank you so much, and I agree with Walter and Lori, and I think that an analysis of the dollars would be fascinating to look at. I do think that this is a problem that has existed for a very long time in the few cities and towns that we have in the Commonwealth, and I can say that I do feel your pain. But as was mentioned, you have the benefit of living in a beautiful small town with a small town feel. And that is my statement.
Thank you. I'm going to ad lib again. Never hand a politician a microphone. You'll regret it. Can we do either a yes or no, or just a show of hands? I'm not going to ask for any commitments, but just as a scheduling matter, would you commit to meeting with the town of Vienna, either the town manager, the mayor, or the council, to discuss this? I think everybody said they were interested in an analysis. Okay. Everybody's interested. Next question, I think a good follow-up to that would be the optional question 6. So we're going to move past the infrastructure question and come back to that perhaps later. So this seems somewhat on topic. What Fairfax County capital expenditures would you support taking place in the town of Vienna over the next 4 to 5 years? For example, Vienna plans to break ground on a new police station in the near future. Is this something the county can help us with? Who starts this time? I'm bouncing around here. Sorry about that. Okay, sorry. Yeah.
No, that's a very interesting question. There are some projects in the town of Vienna that are already in the county's capital improvement program. I mentioned the library is in there. There are also stormwater projects that are moving forward in the town, the stream restoration projects. These are critical projects for retrofitting older parts of the county that were developed before modern stormwater management techniques were really known or implemented at least. In terms of how much the county would bear of town-specific capital projects, that's a discussion we would need to have. I think it relates to the last question, which is the town being shortchanged in terms of how much tax revenue versus how much services that are being provided. It might actually make more sense to look at projects that the county has done and then the county could do going forward within the areas that traditionally have been county versus town. For example, the fire station was renovated back in the early 2000s. I believe it was almost a $4 million project. The county ended up putting $1.5 million into that. The rest was raised by the volunteers, and I think the town put some money in as well. That was a county project, but there was collaboration between the town and the county in terms of how to finance it. We could see something like that for town projects, but I think it's something we have to look at on a case-by-case basis. And frankly, a lot of it is based on what the need is and where the town actually would particularly benefit from county support.
The first part of the town where I would think the county needs to make capital improvements is the schools, because Louise Archer, among others, has got trailer classrooms. And some of those, which town council members said that they grew up going to trailers in Louise Archer and the trailers are still there when their children are going? Was that you, Pasha?
Okay.
all right. So getting into permanent classrooms instead of these makeshift classrooms that have been used for far too long is essential to giving kids the kind of safe, appropriate education that they need. So that's the first thing that I would want the county to do in terms of capital. And I do think that it would be appropriate for the county to look into some support for the police station. There are fancy new police facilities in Fairfax County now, and since Vienna has its own police force, I would be favorably inclined towards having a county role in that, but I'm not prepared to quantify what that would mean. I do think that the partnership between county and town means cost sharing on some select projects, and so I would be happy to investigate that further.
So I completely agree on schools. Schools, as we said, 52% of the Fairfax County budget is our education system. We are vastly behind on renovations and modernizations, as well as expansion and new building of schools and facilities. It's a vital safety concern to have so many kids in trailers. We know that those are not hardened facilities, and those are not safe facilities. We need to make sure that we look out for our children overall. So that would be definitely an area, and that is something that's already, you know, we already have in the system. The other part is the infrastructure needs, and I know we kind of skipped over infrastructure, but those are absolutely essential. A lot of our infrastructure is aging at a point where if we don't take care of it countywide and we don't take a look at the throughways, we're going to have some serious backups of stormwater drains and drainage systems and other things that eventually impact entire communities and very negatively. So we really need to look at some of those infrastructure needs, and that's something where the county really needs to engage in spending the funds that need to be done throughout the county and the community. In terms of helping the local police department, that is something we would need to sit down and discuss and say, you know, what is it that you're looking for? How much are you looking for? We have, Fairfax County has recently put in some money for their upgrades in police departments, as well as money for body cams and other issues. And it would be really good to know, make sure that we are providing services that are uniform throughout the area.
Thanks. Thanks so much for the question about participation with capital expenditures. I think that the county should certainly be looking at the capital requirements of the town. The police station, we should absolutely be looking at that. What is the requirement? What is the support? What kind of money? Where is it coming from? What do we need? But I think that these are conversations that should be happening every day.
I think absolutely we definitely need to be at the county level funding the schools, but I think that's goes without saying in the sense that we already owe that to every part of the county, and Vienna is no different. In regards to a new police station or other capital expenditures for the town of Vienna, I think this ties back into the last question. Education, in my mind, we already should be paying for Vienna, but going back to that idea of, is Vienna paying a disproportionate amount of taxes relative to other citizens in the county? Both from a legal standpoint as well as political standpoint, it's hard to tell at this exact point which of the idea of either reducing taxes at the county level for the citizens of Vienna or increasing spending from the county level towards the town to try and offset that. I'm not sure which of those would be a more viable option, but in the event that trying to reduce the taxes in Vienna and towns similar like Herndon as well, I would very much push to have an increased role than in the past for capital expenditures from the county level, assisting the town of Vienna to try and offset that tax burden in the difference between those who live in towns and those who live in the rest of the county that are not incorporated in that type of way. I think we owe it to our citizenry that the county be using its tax dollars to fairly be helping all of its citizens, and provided the town council, A, would welcome that support, but B, also what they specifically would think were priorities, I would very much be working with my fellow supervisors, encouraging them to be trying to, not just in Vienna, but other towns as well, trying to offset that tax inequality.
Moving right along. In excess of 2 million county and non-county residents use the W&OD trail. One of the biggest bottlenecks on the trail and an impediment to traffic flow and pedestrian movement is the crossing on Maple Avenue. Do you favor a pedestrian or bike bridge across Maple Avenue? And if so, how would you work at the county level to see that such a bridge becomes a reality? So since I went out of order, I'm sorry, if you could help me out. Who went first last time? Okay, Ms. Dodds. Yes, please.
I am one of the people who uses the W&OD trail. I personally run on it mostly, but I have biked on it and walked on it and everything else. So it is a valued park, and it is a park that also creates some risk. And I know that in Reston, we have a crossing at Wheelie Avenue that has been dangerous for many years. And it has taken many years to get a design drawn up for a crossing that is not a surface crossing, but is elevated for bicycles, and it has been planned and it has been funded, and it's still going to take years before we see it become a reality. We have to protect our pedestrians, our runners, our bikers, and our drivers who don't want a collision any more than anyone else does. So we have to begin the process of planning to make that no longer a grade crossing, but create an elevated pedestrian and bicycle crossing at that intersection. I am not sure, right now, in the 6-year transportation plan that the DOT has, there are not even any roads to be built in Hunter Mill District that are planned to be funded within those 6 years. So there is a lot to be done for transportation in Hunter Mill District. I agree that this needs to be a priority. I'm going to have to put myself to the test to figure out what is the way to use the pressure that's needed to get attention to these crying transportation needs in our district.
So pedestrian bike safety is critical and important, and you're absolutely right. There are several crossing areas on the W&OD trail that are not safe and need to be looked at in terms of how we are going to make sure that we accommodate that. One of the things that I mentioned in terms of environmental soundness is that we increase bicycle and pedestrian capacity within communities. So we really have to look at how does that look and work. There are a couple ways that we can look at. We can do an overpass. You can also do a tunnel underneath, and it needs to be looked at as to what is actually feasible, not feasible, and what is the best design that would reflect the community and make sure that we are safe and have the capacity to serve the community. So there's a couple of different ways that we can do that, but it is a long-term project, and if you don't start it now, then it never gets done. So it is something that we have to take a look at and figure out what the priorities are on this and get that done.
We are so fortunate to have the W&OD in our community and going all the way to Alexandria and all the way out to Percival. It's a fabulous park. It's a fabulous amenity. It needs to be safe. Again, as has been mentioned, the Wheelie Bridge has been a long time coming, and it is fully funded, but just the engineering and the coordination, the fact that the trail rides underneath the power easement is another challenge, but I would say let's hop on this fast. We can find funding. Let's start getting studies and start getting rights of way reserved.
So in terms of a bridge on the W&OD trail here in Vienna, for me, simply, it would just be what do the town of Vienna, what do the citizenry want? And there, it's not a yes or no question necessarily. With a bridge, there's any number of different designs, engineering-wise, that could be done for a bridge, and some citizens may like it, some may not. My feeling is that I don't think the majority of citizens would necessarily want a bridge. I could be wrong about that. I think what Shanley mentioned about a tunnel could be a much more agreeable option, but at the end of the day, ultimately, I think what the people of Vienna want should be what's heard in terms of addressing this issue. I personally don't have an ideological stake on this issue to try and advocate or push against the will of the people on that at all. So it's something that I would encourage a dialogue both with the role or the office of the supervisor as well as the Vienna Town Council in terms of moving this through. And then whatever the people decide, I would very much advocate that funds be allocated at the county level to see that it move forward so that it can be safe, because the W&OD trail is such a wonderful blessing to this county, and making sure it's safe but done in a way that the residents approve of is a very important thing to do.
Thank you for the question, very provocative question, and I think actually I agree with most of what my colleagues have said here. I think this one's a little tough because it's not just town and county. You have, as was mentioned, like with the Wheelie crossing, you have Dominion, with the power lines. You also have, let's not forget, Nova Parks, which actually owns the W&OD trail. So I think they would obviously need to be part of the conversation. But this is really important for us to be thinking this way, though, because transportation and mobility is not just cars. And we have to think of other ways that people move around. And certainly bicycling is one. It's not just for recreation. There are a good number of people, and I know we've seen this knocking on doors, who commute by bicycle. And some of them may be going out to Reston to work. And so we need to treat it like that. And so that's why these types of improvements, I think, are important to incorporate into our regular transportation planning process.
Thank you. We have a couple questions left. I'm going to hand the microphone back to our host with the most. Before I do, though, we mentioned the electeds and soon to be sworn in the audience. Just very briefly, as is tradition in the town of Vienna, do we have any candidates for office in the audience? We do have one. Would you state your name and what office you're running for?
I sure would. Hi, I'm Melanie Marin. I'm a town resident, been here for 14 years, and I'm running for the Hunter Mill seat on the school board. So I would work with one of these folks.
Schools have come up quite a bit this evening, so you can talk to somebody about schools after the debate. I'm going to hand the microphone back. Secretario, thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Rosberg.